silence is often mistaken for weakness, but in the world of empaths, silence can become the greatest form of power. Most people believe the strongest empath is the one who feels the deepest, forgives the fastest, and keeps giving no matter how much it hurts. That belief sounds noble, but it hides a truth that very few people ever discover. The most powerful empath is not the one who carries everyone's pain. It is the one who finally understands which pain was never theirs to carry. There comes a point in an empath's life where kindness stops looking like endless sacrifice and begins to look like quiet wisdom. This is the stage that many people never reach, not because they are incapable of growing, but because reaching it requires letting go of beliefs they have carried for years. It demands courage, painful self-reflection, and the willingness to disappoint people who benefited from their endless compassion. This rare level of growth is often described as the Sophia Stage, a stage where empathy is no longer driven by guilt, fear, or the desperate need to keep everyone happy. Instead, it is guided by clarity, balance, and deep inner peace. Very few conversations explore this transformation, because it changes everything people think they know about empathy. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. Yet it is so powerful that it completely shifts the way an empath moves through the world. Relationships begin to change. Manipulation loses its grip. Emotional exhaustion slowly disappears. People who once knew exactly how to control an empath suddenly find that nothing works anymore. This is why some of the most controlling personalities fear this stage more than anger, more than confrontation, and more than distance. They understand that once an empath reaches this level of wisdom, old tactics lose their power forever. The emotional games that once created confusion now become easy to recognize. The guilt that once kept an empath trapped begins to fade. The need for constant approval quietly disappears. What remains is a calm confidence that cannot be shaken by emotional pressure. Many people mistake this change for becoming cold or uncaring. But the opposite is true. The empath still feels deeply. The difference is that those feelings are no longer controlled by other people's demands. Compassion remains, but self-abandonment disappears. Kindness remains, but boundaries become stronger than guilt. Love remains, but it is no longer offered at the cost of inner peace. This is the hidden transformation that so many people overlook because they expect strength to be loud, forceful, or intimidating. Real strength often arrives quietly. It shows itself through peaceful decisions, clear boundaries, and the ability to walk away without anger. Throughout this video, you will discover why this stage is so rare, why countless empaths remain stuck long before reaching it, and what separates ordinary empathy from true emotional wisdom. You will learn how years of people-pleasing, trauma, guilt, and emotional conditioning keep many compassionate people trapped in cycles of exhaustion without even realizing it. You will also discover why the Sophia stage marks the end of that cycle, and why reaching it changes every relationship, every decision, and every part of an empath's identity. Along the way, we will uncover psychological insights, hidden patterns, and powerful truths that are rarely discussed, including why some of the strongest empaths appear quieter than ever just before their greatest transformation begins. The final part of this journey reveals the lesson that ties everything together, and missing it means missing the very reason this stage is considered the highest form of emotional growth. Stay with us until the end, because each part builds on the last, and the complete picture only becomes clear when every piece falls into place. Welcome to the channel, where we explore the hidden depths of psychology, personal growth, and the human mind. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions that challenge common beliefs and reveal powerful insights, subscribe now and join our growing community. Because the understanding you gain today may completely change the way you see empathy forever. Most people grow up believing that empathy is measured by how much a person can endure. The more they forgive, the better they are. The more they sacrifice, the kinder they become. The more pain they accept without complaining, the more admirable they appear. This belief is repeated in families, friendships, relationships, and even in many forms of self-help advice. An empath is often described as someone who always understands, always gives another chance, always puts others first, and always finds a reason to excuse hurtful behavior. At first, this sounds beautiful because compassion is one of the greatest qualities a person can possess. The problem begins when compassion loses its balance. Many empaths slowly begin to believe that saying no is selfish, protecting themselves is cruel, and walking away from unhealthy relationships is a sign that they have failed as caring human beings. They start measuring their worth by how much they can tolerate, instead of how wisely they choose where to invest their emotional energy. Over time, this creates a quiet prison. They become the person everyone depends on, but the person very few people truly understand. They comfort others while hiding their own exhaustion. They solve problems while ignoring the growing chaos inside themselves. They keep forgiving people who have never changed, because they hope that enough love will eventually transform them. Yet kindness alone has never been enough to change someone who refuses to change. This misunderstanding traps countless empaths in cycles that repeat for years. They continue giving to people who only take. They continue listening to those who never listen back. They continue believing that if they become even more patient, more understanding, and more loving, everything will finally improve. Instead, the emotional burden becomes heavier. Their confidence slowly fades. Their identity begins to revolve around fixing everyone else's pain while silently neglecting their own. They mistake exhaustion for love and suffering for loyalty. The truth is far different. Empathy is not meant to erase your own needs. It is not meant to destroy your peace in order to protect someone else's comfort. Real empathy includes compassion for yourself as much as it includes compassion for others. Without that balance, empathy stops being a gift and begins turning into self-destruction. This is one of the hardest lessons an empath ever learns, because it challenges everything they believed about being a good person. They discover that endless forgiveness without accountability only teaches others that they can continue causing harm. Endless helping without limits creates dependency instead of growth. Endless patience without boundaries rewards unhealthy behavior instead of encouraging responsibility. Endless sacrifice eventually leaves nothing left to give. Many empaths spend years chasing the idea that love means never giving up on people. Eventually they realize that wisdom sometimes means letting go. That realization does not arrive overnight. It develops slowly through experience, disappointment, heartbreak, and reflection. Every painful encounter becomes a teacher. Every betrayal reveals another lesson. Every moment of emotional exhaustion quietly asks the same question. How much of yourself are you willing to lose before you decide that your own peace matters too? This question marks the beginning of a completely different journey, one that is less about changing other people and more about understanding yourself. Personal growth does not happen in a single moment. It unfolds through stages, each one revealing a deeper truth about life, relationships, and the human heart. Every empath begins with innocence. During this stage, the world feels simple. They naturally trust people. They believe honesty will be met with honesty, kindness with kindness, and love with love. They expect others to care as deeply as they do because they cannot yet imagine living any other way. This innocence is beautiful, but it also leaves them vulnerable. The next stage arrives through awakening. Small disappointments begin to challenge old beliefs. Certain relationships feel confusing. Some people take far more than they give. Others manipulate emotions while pretending to need help. The empath starts noticing patterns that never made sense before. Questions begin replacing certainty. Why do some people lie without guilt? Why do some people only appear when they need something? Why does kindness sometimes attract people who refuse to respect it? Awareness grows, but understanding is still incomplete. Then comes pain. This stage shapes almost every empath. Broken trust, emotional betrayal, rejection, disappointment, and repeated heartbreak leave deep marks. Some become anxious. Some become people pleasers. Others work even harder to earn love because they believe they somehow failed. Instead of recognizing unhealthy behavior in others, they blame themselves. Pain teaches valuable lessons, but it can also create emotional habits that keep a person trapped. After enough suffering, another stage quietly begins to emerge. Boundaries no longer feel cruel, they become necessary. The empath slowly understands that saying no is not an act of rejection, it is an act of self-respect. Time becomes valuable. Energy becomes valuable. Peace becomes valuable. Not everyone receives unlimited access anymore. This is often the first time they begin protecting themselves instead of constantly rescuing everyone else. Yet even boundaries are only part of the journey. The next stage is discernment. Here, the empath develops emotional clarity. They stop judging people by words alone and begin paying attention to consistent actions. They learn the difference between someone who is struggling and someone who repeatedly chooses harmful behavior. They recognize manipulation more quickly. They understand that compassion does not require blind trust. Their heart remains open, but their judgment becomes wiser. This stage changes relationships in powerful ways, because the empath no longer reacts from emotion alone. They begin responding from understanding. Most people never move beyond this point, because the final stage demands something even more difficult. It requires releasing guilt, fear, and the constant need to be accepted. It asks them to trust themselves completely. This final stage is often called Sophia. The word Sophia has long been connected with wisdom. It is not about becoming smarter than everyone else. It is about becoming deeply aligned with truth. In this stage, empathy and wisdom finally work together instead of pulling in opposite directions. Emotional clarity replaces confusion. Inner peace replaces constant anxiety. Discernment becomes natural rather than forced. Calm strength replaces emotional reaction. The empath no longer feels compelled to explain every decision or defend every boundary. Silence becomes comfortable because their sense of worth no longer depends on other people's approval. Many misunderstand this transformation. They believe the empath has become distant or uncaring. In reality, the opposite has happened. Their compassion has become healthier because it is no longer controlled by fear. They still care deeply, but they refuse to carry responsibilities that belong to someone else. They still forgive, but forgiveness no longer means inviting harmful behavior back into their lives. They still love, but love no longer demands self-sacrifice. This is why manipulation begins to fail. Guilt loses its influence because the empath recognizes it for what it is. Emotional pressure no longer creates automatic obedience. False promises lose their appeal. Empty apologies become easy to recognize. Calm replaces chaos, and that calm becomes impossible to control. Reaching this level sounds simple, yet very few empaths truly arrive there because hidden obstacles continue pulling them backward. Many fear hurting others even when protecting themselves. They confuse another person's disappointment with personal failure. Trauma bonds keep them emotionally attached to relationships that repeatedly damage their well-being, because moments of affection become mixed with periods of pain. The emotional highs and lows create powerful attachments that are difficult to break. Others spend years seeking approval, believing they must earn love through constant giving. Childhood conditioning often strengthens these beliefs. Growing up in environments where love depended on pleasing others teaches a child that their needs should always come last. As adults, this pattern feels normal even when it becomes destructive. Guilt quietly reinforces every unhealthy decision. The empath feels responsible for everyone's happiness while ignoring their own emotional health. Kindness becomes confused with self-sacrifice until they can no longer tell the difference between genuine compassion and unhealthy obligation. These patterns delay emotional maturity because every step toward wisdom requires letting go of beliefs that once felt safe, even when those beliefs were slowly draining the life out of them. The deepest transformation an empath experiences is rarely visible from the outside. There is no dramatic announcement. There is no single moment when the entire world suddenly changes. Instead, it begins quietly, almost unnoticed. One day the empath reacts in the same old way, trying to fix every problem, carrying every emotional burden, apologizing for things that were never their fault. Then, little by little, something starts to shift. They begin asking questions they never asked before. Why do I always feel responsible for everyone's happiness? Why do I feel guilty every time I choose myself? Why do I keep giving to people who never appreciate what I give? Those questions become the beginning of freedom, because the answers slowly uncover patterns that have existed for years. Instead of immediately blaming themselves whenever a relationship becomes difficult, they begin observing the behavior of others more carefully. Instead of rushing to solve every conflict, they pause. Instead of assuming that every unhappy person deserves unlimited emotional support, they start recognizing that some people refuse to help themselves. This change is not driven by anger. It grows from understanding. The empath realizes that kindness without wisdom only creates endless exhaustion. For the first time, they stop measuring love by how much they sacrifice. They begin measuring it by whether it allows both people to grow. This new way of thinking changes everything. They understand that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their time, attention, and emotional energy. Access becomes something earned through trust, honesty, and mutual respect, rather than something automatically given to anyone who asks. This realization feels uncomfortable at first because many empaths were raised to believe that saying yes makes them good people while saying no makes them selfish. Breaking that belief takes time. Every healthy boundary challenges years of emotional conditioning. Yet each boundary also creates a new sense of peace. The empath slowly notices that protecting their energy does not make them less caring. It actually allows them to care in healthier ways. They no longer pour endlessly into relationships where nothing ever returns. They understand that compassion does not require rescue. Someone can suffer without making that suffering another person's responsibility. Someone can struggle without expecting others to carry their entire life. This lesson is incredibly difficult because empaths naturally feel the pain of those around them. Their first instinct is often to help, comfort, advise, or fix. But wisdom teaches them that constant rescuing sometimes prevents others from taking responsibility for their own growth. Every time they solve someone else's problems without allowing that person to learn, they unintentionally keep unhealthy patterns alive. Real compassion sometimes means stepping back instead of stepping in. It means allowing another person to face the consequences that lead to maturity. It means understanding that growth cannot be forced through endless sacrifice. This realization changes how the empath views love itself. Love no longer means carrying another person's emotional weight forever. Love becomes honest. Love becomes balanced. Love respects both people instead of consuming one to protect the other. As this understanding deepens, another powerful truth begins to emerge. Peace becomes more valuable than approval. For many years, the empath may have chased acceptance without even realizing it. They wanted everyone to understand them. They wanted everyone to like them. They feared disappointing people because rejection felt unbearable. This fear quietly controlled many decisions. They agreed when they wanted to refuse. They stayed silent when they wanted to speak. They accepted disrespect because conflict made them uncomfortable. Gradually, that fear begins to lose its influence. The empath discovers that approval is temporary, but peace lasts much longer. Pleasing everyone is impossible, yet protecting inner peace is entirely within their control. They stop shaping their personality around other people's expectations. They become comfortable allowing others to misunderstand them. This is one of the greatest signs of emotional maturity because it shows that their identity no longer depends on outside validation. They know who they are even if someone else refuses to see it. Boundaries also begin taking on a completely different meaning. At one time, they viewed boundaries as walls that pushed people away. Now they understand that boundaries are acts of self-respect. They are not punishments. They are not revenge. They are not proof of becoming cold or uncaring. They simply define where one person's responsibility ends and another person's begins. Healthy boundaries allow relationships to survive because they prevent resentment from quietly building beneath the surface. Without boundaries, even the kindest person eventually becomes exhausted. With boundaries, generosity remains genuine because it comes from choice instead of obligation. The empath no longer fears disappointing people who demand endless access because they understand that real respect cannot exist without limits. This entire transformation happens internally. The outside world may barely notice at first. The empath still smiles. They still listen. They still care deeply. But inside, everything has changed. Their decisions are no longer driven by guilt. Their kindness is no longer controlled by fear. Their generosity is no longer unlimited simply because someone asks for it. Calm replaces urgency. Clarity replaces confusion. Patience remains, but it is no longer endless. Forgiveness remains, but it no longer erases accountability. This quiet change becomes one of the most powerful developments in an empath's life because it cannot easily be reversed. Once someone truly understands the value of emotional balance, returning to constant self-sacrifice feels impossible. This inner strength creates unexpected reactions from the people around them. Those who genuinely love and respect the empath usually appreciate the healthier version that begins to emerge. They recognize that the relationship becomes more honest, balanced, and stable. But controlling personalities respond very differently. They often become frustrated, confused, or even angry because the methods that once worked begin to fail. This is why the Sophia Stage appears so dangerous to toxic individuals. Dangerous does not mean violent. It does not mean cruel. It does not mean seeking revenge or trying to dominate others. The danger comes from becoming impossible to manipulate. Manipulation depends on predictable emotional reactions. It depends on guilt, fear, obligation, insecurity, confusion, and self-doubt. When those emotional buttons stop working, the manipulator loses control. The empath no longer rushes to defend themselves against false accusations because they recognize the trap. They no longer feel compelled to explain every decision because they understand that some people are not looking for understanding. They are looking for control. Emotional pressure no longer produces immediate compliance. The silence that once came from fear is replaced by silence that comes from confidence. Toxic people often find this deeply unsettling because they can no longer predict the empath's behavior. In the past, they knew exactly which words would create guilt. They knew how to trigger self-doubt. They knew how to make the empath question reality. Now those same tactics seem strangely ineffective. Guilt loses its power because the empath understands that another person's emotions are not always their responsibility. Manipulation loses its power because hidden motives become easier to recognize. Emotional control disappears because the empath has learned to pause before reacting. Instead of responding immediately, they observe. Instead of defending themselves, they ask questions. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by emotion, they remain grounded in facts. This shift makes gaslighting much easier to recognize. Statements that once created confusion now sound familiar. The empath notices contradictions. They notice repeated patterns. They notice how certain conversations always seem to end with them apologizing for things they never did. They begin trusting their own memory instead of constantly accepting someone else's version of events. Gaslighting depends on uncertainty. When certainty grows stronger, the manipulation weakens. Calm becomes one of the empath's greatest strengths. Controlling personalities often expect emotional explosions because emotional reactions are easier to manage. Anger creates distraction. Fear creates obedience. Desperation creates dependence. But calm interrupts this entire pattern. A peaceful response gives manipulation nowhere to go. The empath no longer reacts emotionally to every criticism, insult, or accusation. They listen without immediately absorbing every negative word as truth. They separate facts from emotional pressure. This ability makes controlling individuals feel powerless because the relationship no longer follows the script they have relied upon for years. Many toxic people mistake emotional intensity for connection. When the empath stops participating in endless emotional chaos, the manipulator often increases their efforts. They may become louder, more dramatic, more emotional, or more desperate. Yet none of these tactics produce the old results because the empath has changed internally. They understand that another person's inability to regulate emotions does not require them to abandon their own peace. This realization quietly ends many unhealthy cycles. It also reveals another remarkable sign of the Sophia stage. The empath speaks less, but every word carries greater meaning. They no longer feel responsible for filling every silence. They no longer over-explain simple decisions. Their communication becomes clear, direct, and thoughtful. Instead of long emotional conversations trying to convince others to understand, they express what needs to be said and allow the other person to choose how they respond. This confidence often surprises people who knew the empath in earlier stages because it reflects quiet certainty rather than emotional struggle. They also stop explaining themselves to those committed to misunderstanding them. One of the hardest lessons in life is accepting that not everyone wants clarity. Some people benefit from confusion because confusion allows them to maintain control. The empath finally realizes that endless explanations rarely change determined minds. They stop chasing approval through words. They allow actions to speak instead. This saves enormous emotional energy because they are no longer fighting battles that were never meant to be won. Protecting peace becomes a daily practice rather than an occasional choice. The empath begins paying attention to how people affect their emotional well-being. Conversations that leave them drained become less frequent. Relationships built on guilt slowly fade. Environments filled with constant negativity lose their attraction. Peace is no longer viewed as a luxury. It becomes a necessity. They understand that a calm mind allows better decisions, healthier relationships, and greater emotional resilience. Forgiveness also changes meaning. In earlier stages, forgiveness often meant reconnecting, forgetting, and pretending nothing happened. Now forgiveness becomes an internal release rather than an invitation. They forgive because carrying resentment hurts them, not because the other person has earned unlimited access again. This distinction protects both compassion and wisdom. They can wish someone well while choosing distance. They can let go of anger without returning to harmful situations. This is emotional freedom rather than emotional avoidance. Their ability to recognize manipulation grows sharper with every experience. They notice when kindness is being exploited. They notice when affection only appears after boundaries are established. They recognize empty promises that are never followed by action. They become sensitive to consistency rather than charming words. This awareness does not make them suspicious of everyone. Instead, it helps them place trust where it truly belongs. Calm during conflict becomes another defining characteristic. Earlier in life, arguments may have created overwhelming anxiety. Every disagreement felt like a threat to connection. Now conflict is viewed differently. It becomes information rather than disaster. The empath listens carefully, responds thoughtfully, and refuses to match emotional chaos with more emotional chaos. Their calmness often changes the entire direction of difficult conversations because they are no longer feeding unnecessary drama. They also become comfortable choosing distance instead of constant confrontation. Not every misunderstanding deserves a debate. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every relationship deserves another chance. Walking away peacefully becomes an expression of wisdom rather than weakness. They understand that preserving peace is often more valuable than proving a point. This quiet confidence confuses people who expected endless emotional engagement, because the empath is no longer trying to win every argument. They are protecting something far more valuable than being right. They are protecting their inner stability. Eventually, one lesson rises above all the others. True strength has never been emotional hardness. Many people believe becoming stronger means caring less, trusting no one, building thick emotional walls, and refusing vulnerability. That is not wisdom. That is often pain wearing the mask of strength. Emotional mastery is something entirely different. It allows a person to remain compassionate without becoming emotionally captive. It allows love without losing identity. It allows generosity without self-neglect. It allows kindness without inviting exploitation. This is the greatest lesson the Sophia Stage offers. A person does not become powerful by shutting down their heart. They become powerful by guiding it with wisdom. They continue loving deeply because love remains one of the most beautiful human qualities. The difference is that love is no longer blind. It recognizes healthy relationships and unhealthy ones. It celebrates mutual respect instead of endless sacrifice. They can walk away peacefully because leaving no longer feels like failure. Sometimes walking away is the most loving choice for everyone involved. It creates space for truth, responsibility, and growth. They continue helping others because compassion remains central to who they are. But helping no longer means destroying themselves in the process. They offer support without carrying burdens that belong to someone else. They listen without absorbing every emotion. They care without becoming consumed by another person's struggles. They remain available without becoming endlessly accessible. Their heart stays open, yet their peace remains protected, and with every choice they make, wisdom quietly leads where fear once ruled. The journey of an empath is never about becoming harder. It is about becoming wiser. Many people believe the strongest person is the one who can endure the most pain, but true strength comes from knowing when pain is no longer helping you grow. The most dangerous empath is not the loudest voice in the room. They do not seek revenge because they no longer need revenge to feel whole. They do not waste energy proving their worth because they have already found it within themselves. They no longer chase people who choose not to value them, and they no longer allow guilt to make decisions for them. Their greatest power is not that they can control others. Their greatest power is that no one can control them anymore. They have learned the difference between kindness and self-sacrifice, between forgiveness and permission, between love and emotional dependency. That quiet understanding changes every relationship they have and every choice they make. The Sophia Stage is not about becoming a different person. It is about returning to the person you were always meant to be before fear, guilt, and the need for approval convinced you to abandon your own peace. It is the moment when compassion is guided by wisdom, when boundaries become an expression of self-respect, and when inner peace becomes more valuable than winning arguments or pleasing everyone around you. This is the stage where an empath finally stops carrying burdens that were never theirs and starts building a life that reflects balance, clarity, and genuine emotional freedom. As you reflect on everything we have explored today, ask yourself one honest question. Are you still in the stage of healing, learning to let go of old wounds, or have you started stepping into the stage of wisdom where your peace is no longer negotiable? There is no right or wrong answer because every stage has its own lessons, and every step forward is part of becoming stronger. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience may encourage someone else who is walking the same path and remind them that they are not alone. If this video gave you a new perspective or helped you understand yourself a little better, take a moment to support the channel. Please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message today. Every like, every comment, and every share helps these ideas reach more people searching for clarity, healing, and personal growth. Thank you for spending this time with us. And until our next video, continue protecting your peace, trust your wisdom, and never forget that the strongest heart is not the one that gives everything away, but the one that has learned to love deeply without ever losing itself.